Welcome back to the Guardian Project Podcast, episode 47. I'm your host, Andy, and I wanted to give you an update on my stonks portfolio. Although we took a huge hit of maybe $10 whole on Oketra's Last Mercy, I've made up for it with Capture of the Jin Shao, which is now listed at $500 online.
Oh, baby!
I'm rolling in the dough.
Those EDH staples, they're going up and up and up. And I'm your co-host, Mike Coil. And, there is a new Planeswalker that's seeing a lot of play in Standard and Modern. And whenever you see him, he always has his famous quote, look at me. I am the captain now.
I hate you so much.
Yeah.
Please listen carefully.
And this is the podcast where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering.
But mostly Commander.
And before we start, we want to thank our patrons. We appreciate all of your support. If you want to support us, you can head to patreon.com/GuardianProjectPod and donate at any amount.
If you're looking for a different way to support us, we do have a TCG player affiliate link. So if you can't find your singles or sealed product at your LGS, we'd really appreciate it if you went on over to www.guardianprojectpodcast.com and followed our link. You can also subscribe, drop a comment, drop a like. All of it helps out a lot.
Yes. And this week, we are being joined by a guest again for some things that are on the agenda that I forgot to ask you about. Tell me about what's on the agenda.
So today we are joined by one of our LGS's judges, Judge Anthony.
Judge Anthony!
Hey, I'm back.
Woo.
You can't keep me away this time.
I don't remember the last time you were on. I was writing down all of the commanders that we went over, and I feel like it's been a while.
Yeah.
Probably 2 or 3 months now.
Yeah, it's been lonely.
It was for Commander League, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, that is the one.
We did Commander League, which I feel like was in the early 30s. So the episodes where Ryan thought the podcast was going on for ages. Because, no, the 20s. The 20s took ages. 30s we flew through, but we're in 47 now.
Yeah, regardless, it was in the before time, as we now refer to it.
How are you doing during the current times?
I'm doing just fine. I don't know if it's like sad to say. My life is not much different. If anything, I just don't have to drive 2 hours every day for work.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Fair enough.
I'm pretty lucky as well.
The most I've ever been able to work from home.
So Coil, we're joined by Judge Anthony to go over what this week?
We're going to talk about some of the special rulings for the Ikoria set. We know the Ikoria set's been out on Arena for a while, but we're about to hit pre-release. Whether your LGS is going to be open for pre-release or if they're doing some curbside pickup, maybe you want to do some webcam pre-release. But we have some interesting questions to ask Mr. Judge Anthony about some of these interesting combinations, I guess is the best way to say it. And then, of course, we will have Commander of the Week this week, where Andy will talk about his Marisi, breaker of the, not me, but Coil.
It is you. It's never broken you, I don't think.
No.
I've never beaten you with that deck.
I usually play a deck that swings when I play against Marisi.
Or you play the Scorpion God and kill everything that's on the battlefield.
That's right. Murder everything.
So Judge Anthony's here to talk about some mechanics and rulings from from Ikoria. So we've got Companion, Mutate, and Cycling. So we had some user submitted questions. Anthony put together some items. So we're going to go through a bunch of stuff that we're going to learn and we hope is useful to you. Yep. So do you want to do, Anthony, a brief explanation of the 3 mechanics? I mean, Cycling's returning. Most people know what Cycling is, but we've also got Companion and Mutate. Companion's not necessarily a Commander mechanic per se. It works, but it wasn't built for Commander. And Mutate has the most ridiculous situations that I've seen so far.
Yeah, so let's start with the easy one first, which is Companion. Companion is a word that appears on certain legendary creatures in the set And all a companion is that you can put it into your sideboard, and as long as your deck meets a deck building restriction that is listed on the card, then at the start of the game you can reveal that companion and say, I have the opportunity to cast this as though it were in my hand once this game.
Mm-hmm.
It's really strong, actually, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Turns out people in Standard don't like it.
Right.
Talk to the people in what is it? I don't remember if it's Legacy
Modern.
or Vintage. It has Luris. Or is it Luris, the cat?
I think all formats have Luris the Dream Den right now.
The latest I think it's Legacy. The latest Legacy like top 8 tournament, all 8 decks had Luris.
Of course they did.
It's ridiculous.
Luris actually carried me to my first Arena Mythic ranking in Standard.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
What were you playing?
So I built on day 1, I came up with a mono black aggro list with Luris. And Hateful Eidolon with the auras.
Oh yeah.
That give like -3/-3. So you just had the same removal spell they would cast every single turn and attack them to death. It's really good.
And you draw cards because of Hateful Eidolon being out.
Oh yeah. It's an engine. It's real sweet.
Yeah.
So that's Companion.
Yeah.
As for Mutate, this one's a little more complicated.
You can't do it in one sentence like Companion?
I will try. Mutate is an ability that lets you cast a creature targeting another creature and then merges them into the same creature in a pile, sort of like Meld.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But non-human creatures.
It's gotta be
Yes, it has to be specifically a non-human creature.
I learned that in the draft.
Humans don't mutate?
Yeah, I learned that during draft when I go, why can I not cast this card? And then I realized, I put only really a lot of humans with a couple mutate cards.
I'll be honest, the amount of times I've wanted to mutate onto the 1/1 human you make from Castle Ardenvale is like, I think like I if you were Wizards of the Coast and you're like, all right, it's too strong, we can't pull it. It's like, what if we just made it non-human? I'm like, that fixes every single problem. We're good now. Okay.
So we have mutate, right? So you smash them together and you make another creature.
Yep, you smash them together. You choose which card is going to be the top card of your stack. And it has the power and toughness and the types and the colors and all the stuff that's printed on the card of the top card, except it also keeps all the abilities in the text box of all the other cards that are on it. Mm-hmm. So it just makes this super monster to beat your opponents with and is really hard to turn physically.
But it only counts as one creature, and it's weird when you play on Arena with it because it doesn't show the stack of things under it. It just makes it look like the top creature with all the text, which is exactly what the card's supposed to do. Yep. But when you play it on paper, it's much easier to see all the things under it.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then we have cycling.
Yeah, cycling is pretty simple. I'm pretty sure most people have seen it before. It's an ability on a card that while it's in your hand, you pay the cost, and you can discard the card to draw a card. And that's really it. There are some abilities that trigger when you cycle, but that's the gist of it.
Is that considered an activated ability?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I don't think that was on our question list, but it's always a question I've had.
It is an activated ability of the card. Yep.
And we're seeing... Did we see cycling at Cycle 1 previously, or was it always Cycle 2? Was it always Cycle 2? Have we seen one before?
I believe we've seen Cycle 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Sensor was Cycle 1.
Yes, Sensor was Cycle 1. I just like Cycle 1 more than Cycle 2. I like things that are cheap. I like the cheap cards. It's good stuff.
What about pay 2 life cycle?
Did you know that if you take most... Oh, that's no mana.
I would do
that.
That's perfect. I would do
perfect card.
That's 100%. Street Wraith.
Yeah. I guess you're right.
Yeah, that exists.
Did you know that paying less mana for the same card is better?
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
that's 100% of the time.
So knowing our mechanics, we had a lot of questions submitted. Anthony has a few that he wanted to discuss as well. So do we want to just start at the top of the list, or do you want to go over yours first?
Let's just start from the top.
Okay. So the first question is companions are played from the sideboard, and this is not specifically commander related, this question. It says, if I have 2 companions and my deck meets the criteria, can I play both? If I have 4 copies of the same companion in my sideboard, can I play all 4?
So I touched on this a little bit when I was explaining the mechanic. So according to the rules for companion, if you have 1 or more companion creatures in your sideboard that meet the deck building requirements of your deck, you may reveal up to 1 of those creatures before the game begins. Emphasis on 1.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you have multiple creatures in your sideboard that can fulfill that role, you have to choose only 1 of them.
Yep. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Cool.
And then if someone's playing, so if someone's playing 4 copies, you just pick 1 of them.
Right.
Yep.
Can't have all 4.
And I noticed people playing like the Gyruda, the Simic Garuda decks, they would have 3 copies main board, 1 copy sideboard. I was like, well, why? If all 4 were sideboard, that'd be better, right? But yeah, can't do that.
Can't do that one.
Coil, what is our next question?
So, next question. For a mutated creature, what is that creature's converted mana costs for reasons such as like birthing pod, like pod decks?
Gotcha. Yeah. So the cost of the creature is always going to be whatever is printed on the topmost card of your pile. This is true for really any of the copyable attributes of the card. So keywords and trigger abilities, activated abilities, the power and toughness, creature types, any super type, color. The only exception to this is characteristic defining abilities, which for those that don't know what that is something that is defining the creature type of the card, such as Changeling, or a power and toughness setting ability. So my favorite green card, probably, Dungrove Elder, has a power and toughness equal to the number of forests you control.
Mm-hmm.
If Dungrove Elder is not the top card, you ignore that characteristic defining ability.
Gotcha.
Makes sense. So,
to answer the question again directly, the mana cost is always going to be whatever is on the top card.
Okay. Next question. If someone instant speed hacks, so changes, a creature type to be a human that is currently the target of a mutate spell, what happens?
Right. So, as you mentioned earlier when we were going over mutate, you have to be targeting a non-human creature with your mutate spell if you want to cast it for its mutate cost. What actually happens is kind of the same as if somebody just casts a removal spell, in that target is no longer legal. So a mutate spell that no longer has a legal target just resolves as a normal creature. So if for some reason your target creature can't be the target creature anymore, you'll just get the creature spell as a creature. So,
perfect. So like just like as if it was destroyed, it just pretends like it's no longer a legal target, and it's just comes onto the battlefield as that creature, non-mutated.
Correct. It's a lot like Bestow in that way.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So next question we have is, what happens if you mutate onto a temporary creature such as a manland?
So there's a long and a short answer to this, and I'll get into both. The short answer is that the top card determines what the pile becomes when the temporary effect ends, period. The long answer has 2 parts.
Okay.
So if the temporary creature is the top card, then whenever the effect that causes the object to become a creature ends, the mutated creature goes with it and becomes whatever the card is normally supposed to be. So if it's a land, it becomes a land. The creature is still mutated onto it, and the land still has all those abilities, but it's a land now.
Okay.
Alternatively, if you merge the temporary creature below the new mutation, then you have the effect still animating the thing, but it's no longer that thing. And when the effect ends, it just becomes whatever the top creature is. The interesting thing to touch on here is, what are the characteristics of the card while the effect is still happening, but the top card isn't the temporary creature. So you mutate onto a land.
Okay.
But you put the land underneath.
Okay.
But the temporary effect is still happening that animates the land.
Okay.
So what are the characteristics of the card? Because the top card has its own power and toughness and types and abilities and cost and name. But you also have this effect that's giving attributes to the card. The answer to that basically is that the temporary effect wins out. And the reason for that is layers, and I won't go too deep into layers right now. But short explanation of layers is that they're a system in Magic that determine how and when effects are applied to a permanent. Mutate puts all of the text from all the cards in the stack into layer 1, which is your copyable attributes. So when you have all of your stack there, you are pretending as if all the abilities on the cards are all in the same text box.
Okay.
This is different to something like an aura, which is text added later, and you can't copy that if you were to play like a clone. All that special effect that's animating the permanent happens later in layers. And when you're determining the abilities of a card based on the stack effects, you start at the topmost layer and move your way down. So you start with what's just printed on the card, and then you edit it. So let's say, for example, you have a treetop village that you've turned into a creature, and treetop village says, okay, this land is now an ape, it's green, it's a 3/3, and has trample. Then you mutate another card onto that treetop village above it. Until that effect ends, despite the fact that you've now mutated something on top of it, it is still a 3/3, green, an ape, and has trample. Once that effect ends, then it just becomes whatever the top card is.
Interesting.
But it's still a land and has the ability to become a green ape again.
It is not still a land. Because it only has the types of the top card.
Oh, you're right.
But it can tap for mana.
Yeah, that's actually
as long
pretty
as you
big.
didn't play the land that turn.
Oh, that was a good long answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not have gotten that with just the short answer.
No. That's why I kind of wanted to do both. It's intense.
Oh. So this one is a more specific question related to a specific commander. So we'll talk about the commander as well. But so I guess we'll first do that. So it's a question related to the commander Zedru the Great-Hearted. So it's the Minotaur monk that cares about the number of permanents that you own that your opponents control. So it says at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanents you own that your opponents control, and you pay red, white, and blue, and you give control of a permanent to an opponent. So the question is, if you give away a mutated creature that you own, let's say it's got 2 cards on, just 2. You know, it's a creature that mutated, so there's technically 2 things that merged into one. If you give that away to an opponent, what count is Zedru seeing of number of permanents that you own that your opponents control? Is it 1 or is it 2?
So it's 1.
It's
and
1.
The reason is when you merge creatures, usually through mutate, when you merge creatures, all those cards become one game object. They're all one permanent. So the game sees that as just all one thing.
Boo, I want to merge 7 things and give it away. But I don't know if red, white, and blue has 7 merge permanents anyway.
I don't think it does.
It might have like 3. Okay, Zedru, not a fan of mutate.
No.
It's probably not a great solution for you if you're a Zedru player.
That's true. Okay. How about this one? So if I control a morph creature, I control a 2/2 morph, and I mutate onto this morph creature, but I choose to make the morph the top card. Can I still megamorph or flip morph, whichever this particular morph creature has?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as the top card is a face down creature, you can activate the morph ability of any card actually in your stack anytime you normally could, and it turns the entire stack face up. Interesting to note, whether or not a creature is face down or face up in the case of merged creatures is entirely determined by the top card. So had you mutated on top of the morphed creature, you would not be able to turn it face up because the top card is not face down, and you can only morph face down creatures.
Interesting.
Something to consider here is that as long as that top card is the face down creature, it cannot gain any abilities from having been mutated onto, because face down creatures are always 2/2s with no text. That's just a game rule.
Not even like evergreen keywords or anything?
Nothing. It can have no text on it. So this is different from something like an aura, which is adding abilities to a card separately. Mutate and merging creatures is changing the text box on the card, which is different. And the game says, no, it has to have no text. It has to be a 2/2. It does not care about what you've mutated onto it.
Interesting.
Wow. I
Yeah.
just learned.
So once you turn it face up, it gains all those abilities magically.
I didn't even know any of these things anyways. I don't play morph text at all.
I have the Kadena pre-con that I put like 10 cards into, so it's interesting. So if the top card is face down, and if it has a morph ability or a megamorph or okay, I have another question. What if the top card was originally manifested?
As long as that is still the top card, you can still unmanifest it for the cost of the top card.
But okay, so let's say you unmanifested it and then it got flipped face down again. Can I unmanifest it again? I guess that's probably already a question people have asked.
It is. And
okay.
You cannot. Yeah, it has to be still face down from when it got manifested for that to work.
Interesting. Okay.
Interestingly, if somehow you manage to finagle a way where you have both your top card face down and another card in the stack face down. So let's say the example where you have a morph creature, you go on top of it, and then someone plays Ixodron, which turns them all face down. You can unmorph from anywhere in your pile. So you can pay any of the morph costs in your pile, and it turns the entire thing face up.
So if you have a creature with megamorph on top, but then you also have just a random morph creature on the third item below it, you can pay that third item below's cost instead of the top one if it's cheaper, if you want to conserve mana.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get the ability of the one that you paid for when it flips up? Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It has both. It has both.
Because it has all the text.
Yeah.
Are there any legal ways to actually do that?
Not off the top of my head,
I
but
can't
if it ever
think
comes
of
up,
anything.
you'll know. So the most common way that something similar to this might happen, where you have morph abilities that you're using from not the top card, would be mutating on top of a face down creature, and then it's the creature getting turned face down that's on top, and then unflipping the whole stack.
How insightful.
This is weird.
Okay.
Yes.
We have another one. Most of these are all mutate questions. So
Surprise.
Shock.
Surprise. Okay, so you have Liliana, Heretical Healer. So let's explain that one first. So it's a legendary creature from Magic Origins. It's one of the creatures that transforms, or it spark ignites into the Planeswalker. And so Liliana has whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile Liliana, Heretical Healer, return her to the battlefield transformed as the Planeswalker, and if you do, you make a zombie. So the question is, what happens when a Liliana, Heretical Healer has a mutated creature under her, so she's been mutated, but she's the top card, and then another creature you control dies, and she gets exiled and returns to the battlefield face up as Liliana, Defiant Necromancer, Planeswalker? What happens to that stack of cards?
Okay, so this is a bit of a weird one and requires two key pieces of information. So one, when a merged permanent leaves play, all the parts of the pile go with it.
Right.
The whole thing goes. The second part is that an ability that tracks an object between zones will track each individual piece of the merged permanent rather than just the thing that normally has the ability. Okay. So what will happen is Liliana and all the rest of the stack will get exiled from the ability, and then it will return transformed along with any other things in the stack that can transform. Because you have to be able to fulfill the requirement of transforming in order to return. So if somehow, again, this is hypothetical, you finagle a way to get, let's say, Liliana and Nissa, the flip Nissa, both in the stack.
Okay.
And cause them both to leave. They will both return transformed, but anything else that was in the pile that can't transform will not return. They'll just stay exiled.
They just stay. So if you, let's say you only have Liliana, she's the only thing on the stack that could transform then. And you have, let's say, 2 mutated creatures under her or something. And you exile her. She's the only thing that would return because nothing else can transform.
Correct. Yep. All the things that can transform will transform and return. Everything else just stays exiled because it can't fulfill that instruction.
Exiled forever.
Interesting.
Yep. Also, note, you would have to change Liliana from being a human.
That's
somehow.
true.
Nissa,
That's true.
Nissa, legal mutate target.
Nissa works.
There we go.
Nissa's a way better. Yeah.
Also,
example
the only one that's naturally able to do that, right? All the rest of them are humans.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, technically,
so better example. Nissa.
I guess Nicol Bolas, but that's not from the same set.
Right.
Yeah. Besides,
but
you wouldn't want to mutate Nicol Bolas. He'd get pissed.
See that pesky human clause. See, when I'm coming up with questions, I'm still not.
We can hack them. It's fine. We can hack them.
All right, we're just going to change the creature type of Liliana, mutate under her with a non-transform card, and lose it forever.
Yeah.
New bucket list item. Throw away a card just to do it.
Okay. Got another one involving one of my favorite Psycho legendary creatures. So the God Eternal gods that were printed in War of the Spark say when they die, you have the choice of moving, or actually when they leave the battlefield, if they die or get exiled, you have the choice of, instead of putting it into your graveyard or into exile, you can put them third from the top of your library. Let's say that is a mutated pile of cards. What happens?
So this one's kind of sweet. I really like this interaction because it's just good. So like I said before, any ability that tracks the object as it moves zones will track all of the parts of the pile. So that means that if there's a God Eternal anywhere in your pile, when it gets exiled or dies, the ability that would put that card third from the top applies to all of the cards. And you get all of them.
Nice.
They all go into your library, and because your library is a hidden zone, you get to 1, choose the order they go in, and 2, don't have to tell anybody what order that is.
Perfect.
So you get to play like a mind game of, what am I going to draw? Right?
I wonder how Arena does it then. I don't know because you can do this on Arena right now. And Arena, classically, if you get to look at someone's hand, it keeps them face up so that your opponent can constantly see what's there and not forget it, as if like you wrote it down on a piece of paper. I guess it would just show all of them face down and you pick the order and then your opponent just doesn't know.
That's a really good question. That is interesting.
I wonder how Arena handles it. If someone has mutated a God Eternal, it's died, tell us if you've done this.
Yeah, we do know Arena still has some issues. I haven't been able to play Mausoleum Secrets in any of my decks yet because it doesn't see the number of creatures in my graveyard and doesn't let me search for anything.
Really? I didn't know that was a known bug. When did that start happening? Or has that always been an issue with Mausoleum Secrets?
I looked it up on Reddit, and I found someone who was having an issue with it like a year ago, and it's still a problem today. So.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, my Nethroi Brawl deck does not have a tutor in it anymore.
Oh, I play that card a lot in regular Commander. That's just
a good card.
So
you do have
good.
to reveal it. That's a one downside of that.
I mean,
card.
but you use it the turn you're gonna play it. It's fine. Demonic Tutor.
It's instant speed, so you actually can do it on someone else's.
Oh,
turn.
I got okay.
Oh no, I have to reveal it on the turn the end step before I use it.
And it goes directly into your hand, not on top of your library.
What a downside.
All right, so this is a question. The next one is one that came up on stream. This was a question that somebody submitted, and there was lots of discussion on this. So I think we will want to discuss the card in question as well before we go over this one. So can you explain the interaction between Mimic Vat and a mutated pile of creatures? So Mimic Vat is a card that looks for creatures dying, and then it specifically says whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile it. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. And then it has an activated ability to pay 3 generic and tap it and create a token that's a copy of a card exiled with Mimic Vat. It gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So let's say we have 4 creatures on this mutated pile and they die. What happens?
So the previous thing I said was kind of sweet. This is really sweet. So it doesn't work quite as well as you'd hope, but it works better than you think it would. So this is another situation where you have an ability tracking the object as it's moving zones. And Mimic Vat wants to exile all of those cards now because it's tracking each of those pieces. So all the cards move under Mimic Vat. They're no longer part of the same pile anymore because as soon as the creature left to play, all the parts broke up.
Okay.
But now when you activate your Mimic Vat, you can choose any of the cards exiled with it and make a token of that card. Yes. So let's say you had 3 different creatures in your pile. Every time you activate Mimic Vat, you get to choose which one of those 3 you want.
Oh, that's really nice.
That's really nice.
That's so
the
good.
The only thing that's kind of a downer about it is that if you want to exile another thing with Mimic Vat, all the cards that are under it leave. So you don't just get to switch out one, you have to switch out all of them.
Makes sense.
Now, does Mimic Vat grant the token copy the phrase exile at next end step? Like, so if you were to mutate on top of one of those tokens, does it no longer exile, or would it also exile the mutated creature?
So it refers to that permanent. Okay. So if you were to mutate on top of it, it would still get exiled.
Okay. So there's another
Important
way to exile your mutated creatures on purpose.
Yay!
Oh my gosh. That's a really interesting one though, because you can at least then you can pick the creature that you need at the time, right? Hopefully all 3 of them had some sort of an ability, and then you could. Well, you don't want to mutate on top of them because it's going to get exiled.
Yeah, don't do that unless you really have to. I mean, if it's coming from a mutate pile, so they probably have somewhere in that pile when this creature mutates. So maybe if you really just need the mutate trigger or something.
If your commander is one of the mutate commanders, then even though the whole thing gets exiled, you're just putting your commander back in your command zone. You can do it again.
Absolutely.
That's great. That's great. Mimic Vat, folks. It does. It works wonders in mysterious ways.
All right. This next one is one that Andy was actually super excited about. He texted me about it a few days ago. This one is, if I mutate over a Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, which says it has haste, and you can tap it to create a copy of target non-legendary creature. That also gains haste, and then you have to sacrifice it at the end step. I believe that's how it's worded. I'm not actually reading the card right now. Okay. So if you mutate over a Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, does this go infinite if the top creature is non-legendary?
Oh yeah. So as long as the top creature itself isn't a legendary permanent, you can totally target the merged pile with the Kiki Jiki ability. And since the copyable text is all the cards in that pile, the tokens will also have the Kiki Jiki ability. Granted, you have to tap the token to make a copy of the token, so you're just making a bunch of tapped tokens. But if you have something that cares about
like impact tremors,
sacrifice, it's great. Yes, So, if you don't have those things, it doesn't really do anything, but yeah.
But I
sure,
figure
go
if you're
off game.
playing a mono red Kiki Jiki deck, right? I mean, like, it's a viable commander deck. You got 3 mono red mutate creatures from this set. You got the Dinosaur Cloud Piercer, you got the Phoenix, Everquill Phoenix, and then the Porkia Parrot. And so if you really wanted to, if you're already playing things like Perforos, God of the Forge, and all those cards, you can just go infinite with 3 different options. You have 3 infinite combos with your commander.
I mean, who wouldn't be afraid of an infinite amount of Porky Parrots out there?
I mean, what does that even
strong.
do? You can tap it and this creature deals X damage to any target where X is the number of time this creature is mutated. It's not very good.
Yeah, here's a fun thing. None of those tokens have ever mutated, so it deals 0.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but you could have a non-legendary Kiki Jiki with reach, and it's a 5/4 Cloud Piercer. See?
Incredible.
You guys, you've got it. I honestly think that this is something that's worth playing. If you're playing Kiki Jiki, you just have 3 more cards that go infinite with Kiki Jiki.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
You're already playing.
You're probably already playing the Impact Tremors and Perforos. So.
You're already,
Zealous Conscripts and all that.
You can add Goblin Bombardment if you're not already playing it and sack all the infinite tokens you just... You should probably be playing it, right? I mean, I assume you are. What's the red creature that goes infinite with Twin Flame? Twin Flame and it has flash and you copy a spell on the stack. Dualcaster Mage, thank you. See, that's already in the deck too. So I would assume
that seems. If you could get that in the pile somehow, that seems really
getting Dualcaster Mage in a mutate pile. Maybe the next time we come back here, they're gonna let you merge things from other. That don't have mutate?
Let me ask the obvious question.
Can.
Is Dualcaster Mage a human?
Oh, shoot. Son of a...
I'm telling you, Wizards of the Coast thought of everything by just saying non-human.
We're going to play Arcane Adaptation and name something other than human, and it'll be fine.
You have to play Conspiracy. Arcane Adaptation only adds the creature type. Conspiracy transforms the creature.
See,
there we go.
See, next time around when we come back, maybe they'll have like a mutate where you combine them when they're already on the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like a soul bond, but instead of it entering and then choosing its pair, you just mutate with something that's already out. I don't know. Do this. I want this, and I want humans to be an option.
Make all of our weird questions applicable.
Okay, the next question is, can you explain the mechanic mutate and its interaction with the card Leadership Vacuum, which is the card that came out in the last Commander set, and it says it's an instant for 2 and a blue that says target player returns each commander they control from the battlefield to the command zone, draw a card.
A card which I think is way underplayed.
It is.
I agree.
It's only got 1 printing. That's the problem.
Yeah. So this is a weird one. This is a strange case for sure. So normally when your commander moves between zones, you have the option of putting it in the command zone instead as a replacement effect. With merged creatures, the way this normally works is that any parts of the merged creature that the replacement effect doesn't apply to go to where they normally go, and then your commander gets the replacement effect and it goes to your command zone. And everything goes to where it's supposed to be. The issue here is that it's putting the creature directly into the command zone. So there's no replacement effect going on, which means everything in the pile goes to the same place, and that place is the command zone. But you can only cast commanders from your command zone and your commander, which means all those cards are not exiled, they're not in your graveyard, they're chilling in the command zone, just stuck.
Just look at me now. I'm sitting in the command zone. I will do nothing else for the rest of this game.
So are cards in the command zone considered in exile?
No, they are in their own zone.
So there's literally no way to get it back.
Retrieve them.
You can't fate sweeper them back or anything like that.
Nope, they're stuck forever.
The original, I remember Mark Rosewater was doing a podcast a while ago, and he said the original like exile a creature, there was supposed to be like a forever removed from the game. You can never get it back. And then when they came out the Eldrazi processors, they were like, well, that zone is not doing what it was supposed to do. That card was good, so it needed to go away if it said to exile it. See, they just came up with the forever gone zone. It's just mutate being shoved into the command zone forcefully.
It's kind of a weird thing here is that this isn't a new interaction unique to mutate. There was one other situation that could already happen with this card that produced the same result.
Really? Okay.
And if your commander was either half of Brazella, and you have Brazella melded on the battlefield, and you leadership vacuum, the same thing happens because the whole card moves at once, and it goes to your command zone, but only one of those creatures is your commander. So one is just stuck there forever, and the other one can be cast.
Interesting.
And I can say one time in my entire life have I seen somebody meld into Brazella. And I beat it.
I want to see that happen,
Nice.
actually, because I haven't been able to see that.
Anthony was actually in that game, and it was somebody melded and then forgot that I had my a creature that it's the green creature. Whenever a creature enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and your opponents can't block with creatures with power less than.
Champion of Lambholt.
Champion of Lambholt. They forgot that my Champion of Lambholt came back to me with like 17 counters on it. And they're like, oh, I could have killed you if I just swung, but now I can't block and I die. Otherwise, I should not have won against Brazella. And just out of respect, I should have just scooped because they went through all that work to get Brazella.
I think the scariest Brazella I ever saw was somebody melded it against me while they were playing Gaddock Teague. So there was a Gaddock Teague in play and a Brazella. So you can't cast non-creature spells that cost more than 4, and you can't cast any spells that cost 3 or less. And I was very sad.
That's tough. Yeah, you can't cast spells then.
Pretty much. Yeah. Do you have a big creature? Because if no, you just can't play it.
Gross.
Okay, so I had a follow-up question on this leadership vacuum thing that just came to mind.
Okay.
If you, sorry, I didn't give you an opportunity to prepare for this one, but if you steal someone else's commander via, let's say, an agent of treachery, and that commander happens to be non-human, and you mutate on top of their commander, or even if it doesn't actually, in this case, it doesn't even matter if it's their commander, it's their permanent, and you mutate on top of it. So let's say you mutate underneath it. We'll go over both scenarios, over or under. And someone plays a bounce spell that says return the creature to its owner's hand. What is it every single card in the pile would go back to its owner's hand?
So I actually thought about this.
Okay.
I thought this might come up.
Okay, good.
So in the case of bouncing it, the cards are going to go wherever they're supposed to. So if any part of the stack is something you don't own, it's going to go to its owner's hand.
Okay.
Your things are going to go to your hand. Leadership Vacuum, as far as I understand it, should do the same thing. Their commander and anything they own will go to their command zone. Your things will go to your command zone.
Gotcha. Okay.
Interesting. That's the end of our questions that came from supporters of our show and people on stream. But you said you have a couple of questions prepared or important things to note.
Yeah. So the first one is some good news to people who play Child of Alara or Elenda the Dusk Rose.
Oh.
And this is a weird interaction with what happens when a creature that has your commander in the merge pile would die. And the answer is it both dies and your commander goes to the command zone as a replacement effect. It does both. Because you have the card still going to your command zone and all the rest are still going to the graveyard. So it still sees, well, cards got put in the graveyard, so it must have died. So you get to get your death triggers while still putting your commander in your command zone.
Nice.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That is great. So you said it's Elenda and Child of Alara. Okay, so Child of Alara, you can play any of these mutate creatures. It's all 5 colors.
Yep. Elenda is a little bit more difficult, but they exist.
I think the Elenda ones are actually pretty good for an Elenda deck. Specifically, there is a white merge creature, or mutate creature rather, that when it mutates makes 2 1/1s with lifelink.
Mhm.
Yeah, cats.
So in a deck where you're trying to make a bunch of tokens and sacrifice them, it generates more tokens, you sacrifice them, and it makes your Elenda larger and allows you to get the trigger when it dies. I think that just might be in the deck forever.
Yeah.
Like that might just be a staple part of Elenda now.
And that card is Cub Warden, a 3/5 cat with lifelink itself. Interesting.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So the next one, and this might be something that you already heard about. It's been making rounds as just a weird thing, and that is mutating onto a Theros god. So if you mutate above a Theros god, and then lose the proper amount of devotion to make that creature a creature, you end up with a permanent that has no types. It's a nothing. It's not an enchantment because the top card is no longer the god. It's a creature, but it's also not a creature because of the ability of the god, so it's a nothing.
Interesting. But now if you reestablish your devotion, it becomes a creature again?
Yep, it will still turn into a creature again, but because it has no other fallback types, when it removes that creature type, it just removes everything.
Interesting. You just got me thinking about like my brain just went on a huge other tangent of like win condition permanents, turning them into creatures and then mutating stuff on them and trying to make them an uninteractable permanent.
Well, think about it in terms of, like, let's say a Perforos, which is already indestructible, so it's already hard to kill, but you could still play something that exiles target creature or exiles target enchantment. If you can put something on top of the Perforos and then remove the devotion, it is very, very difficult to remove that.
That's awesome. Yeah, you would need exile target permanent, right?
Yeah, so it has to be exile target permanent, exile all permanents, or return all permanents. But any exile target enchantment or exile target creature cards are just not going to work. Okay.
What about, so there's that white changeling where you pay X into it and it makes everything, it only makes all your creatures all creature types. So it has to be a creature to begin with. I was going to say you can activate the ability and then give it away and then it would become a creature of whatever type you want, but that doesn't work.
We should just build a deck that's like, how can I mutate to do nothing? What is this? This is my do nothing mutate deck.
This is the weird, a weird interactions deck would actually be super fun to play against. It seems a little vain, a little bit, to be like, I have to explain all of these interactions to the entire board while also not actually trying to win the game because I don't know how you do that.
Well, for that deck, I happen to have another thing that goes in it, and that's the next thing I wanted to bring up. Which is what happens when you mutate above a planeswalker that's become a creature. Turns out it makes a pretty busted permanent because it still has all of the loyalty abilities of the planeswalker that you have mutated above, and it has loyalty counters still on it, and you can activate those loyalty abilities just like it was a planeswalker, except it's no longer a planeswalker, so you can't attack it to remove loyalty.
Interesting.
So unless they kill the creature, they can't remove any loyalty counters from your planeswalker effectively.
So we're talking the Sarkhans. I mean, I guess you can potentially do it with other things, but at least Sarkhan, there's 2 versions of Sarkhan that turns into dragons. The new one from War of the Spark, and then there was the one from Khan's Tarkir.
Mm-hmm. And all the Gideons.
Oh, and the Gideons. The Gideons also turn into creatures.
Those seem like the busted ones, the Gideons. That are already like indestructible and can't be dealt damage.
Yeah, and that'd be pretty good. I mean, with the War of the Spark Sarkhan, you can turn all of your creatures into, or all your planeswalkers rather, into creatures.
True.
You can get your pick. But the other nice thing there is that once you have removed all the loyalty from this creature that is doing planeswalker things, because it's not a planeswalker, it doesn't have the ability to sacrifice itself.
Right.
So you can just start adding counters again with the plus ability of the planeswalker.
So no, it doesn't count as a planeswalker anymore, though, correct?
Correct.
So in the instance of Gideon of the Trials, it says you must control Gideon Planeswalker. Then you don't have that condition met.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's no longer a Planeswalker, and it's no longer Gideon.
And then it's the same thing for the Gideon that flips back and forth between creature and Planeswalker. Like when it's your turn, it's a creature. When it's not your turn, it's not a creature.
Right. So with that one specifically,
that is a human.
Weird
it's a human, that. By the way.
It's a human. If you find a way to get it onto that Gideon, its static ability that makes it a 4/4 is still on it.
Okay.
So every time it switches back to your turn, that ability is going to apply and overwrite whatever the top card says the power and toughness is and all of its types, and it's going to make it a human soldier 4/4.
So if you make Gideon the top card in that pile, and it becomes not your turn anymore, and it's no longer a creature on top, then what?
Then it becomes a Planeswalker.
So it can become a Planeswalker again.
And so in that situation, it becomes a Planeswalker again like normal, and it can be attacked like normal, and does normal Planeswalker things, but it has all these extra abilities from the mutated thing.
Okay. We're gonna put a rampaging Ferocidon underneath it. Is that the card I'm thinking about? No. The really big dinosaur, whenever it takes damage, you get to destroy permanents.
Ooh.
I forget what it's called, but that'll keep your Planeswalkers alive right there.
Oh, that was a good one.
I got into this a little bit with Morph as an example, but what happens? Let's say you have a vampire from Innistrad that has two faces.
Okay.
And then you merge onto that, and it's no longer the top card. And then you meet the requirements that transforms the creature. What happened?
Please tell us.
The answer is that anytime you meet the condition to transform any card in your merged pile, you transform all the parts of the pile that can transform. So even though it's not the top card, you transform the part underneath it, and it gains whatever is on that side.
Okay.
Okay. And this is another one where, hypothetically, if you manage to get multiple double-face cards in the pile together, they all transform at the same time.
Okay. So you turn Ormondal, you turn Westvale Abbey into a creature. You mutate on it. You get another flip card on there. You flip it, and now you have an Ormondal.
Yeah.
This is pretty great, guys. This is awesome.
Are all of the werewolves humans on one side, and then werewolves, are they all humans? Are the Eldrazi ones originally humans?
With the exception of the Eldrazi's.
Exception of the Eldrazi's. Interesting.
Yeah, the Eldrazi ones, I think like Kessig Prowler is just a wolf on the front side and then flips into like a wolf horror.
So then you can mutate onto the werewolf, and then it'll stay mutated even if it turns back into a human?
Yes.
So you can have mutated humans.
Yeah, as long as the ability, or as long as the target was legal when you cast and resolve the spell, you're good.
I love it. We found it.
Oh.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about here isn't a rules interaction as much as it is a rules clarification about a specific card.
Okay.
And it is the card that I believe to be the worst templated card in the set, which is saying a lot.
Okay.
And that is the Ozolith.
Okay.
And so for those who don't remember what that card does, is a legendary artifact that says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all the counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. Seems pretty simple.
Okay.
But when you read that, it says put those counters on the Ozolith. So if you're a player reading that, you might think, okay, I have my creature, it leaves play, it had counters, so I'm going to pick up the counters off of that creature. I'm going to put them on this Ozolith because it says put those counters on it.
Yep.
That's not what happens. That's not what the card does. So what happens is that counters are counted. You figure out how many counters and of what type, and then put the same type and number of counters also on the Ozolith. You never move the counters off of the thing that already had them.
Okay.
Despite the card literally saying move those counters.
Yeah.
Put those counters on the Ozolith.
Because that's a super important point. Like even in Pioneer with the running with scissors deck with Insole Artifact, insoling the Ozolith when it had all of those counters on it, but it doesn't actually have the counters.
So it has the counters, but not the counters that were originally on the creature.
Correct.
They're not the same counters.
So what you're saying is if there was something that left the battlefield and would say if you draw a card for each counter on this, you would still get that because they're not actually leaving it. They're just going onto the Ozolith, but they stay on it as it leaves it.
Yes, and this is why it's very important because those counters were still on the thing that left. So you still get all the things that are related to that creature having counters. This matters for things like Undying or Persist, where it checks whether or not the creature had a counter on it when it left the battlefield.
Right.
If the Ozolith did what it said it did on the card, then you would just have infinite Undying triggers because it wouldn't have the counter on it. The Ozolith removes the counter, so it just keeps coming back. But that's not how it works. The really relevant one for this, for our format specifically, is the card Skullbriar, the Walking Grave.
Oh.
That's the one that when it leaves, goes back to the command zone or changes zones, it doesn't lose its counters, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
As long as it's still face up in a public zone, it keeps all the counters on it of any type. So, if the card worked as it read, you would remove all the counters off of Skullbriar and put all those counters on the Ozolith. But what actually happens is you count the number and type of counters on Skullbriar and put that many also on the Ozolith. So Skullbriar still keeps its counters.
So you're like doubling them.
Back, you double it.
Oh
Yeah, exactly.
my gosh. Maybe, just maybe, I can build my 5th Golgari deck.
Yeah.
So that interaction does work identically with Rian Last of the Abs, correct?
It's similar. So
is in the double counters part.
Yes.
Okay.
Rayhan wants you to actually move the counters after it dies, like put the same amount of counters. Right. And I actually really prefer the templating of Rayhan because when you read it, you say, oh, yeah, I know exactly what this does. The Ozolith doesn't like that for some reason. Probably because it's trying to deal with multiple counter types.
Sure.
And they wanted to shorten that. So this is their solution. And I don't like it, as it turns out, as a judge.
I just want a creature with a +1/+1 counter, a -0/-1 counter, an indestructible counter, and something else to die, and then someone to track all those things.
Through the Ozolith, all things are possible.
All things are possible.
That's what
you can make this dream a reality.
Andy was building his counters deck, and he had all these things, and he's like, "Oh, I never knew some of these counters existed." And I just went and looked in one of my really old Shirei piles, and I'm like, "Oh, Armor Thrall +0/+2 counters. That's one he hasn't thought of yet."
This has a Doom counter, a Fate counter, a Divinity counter.
The best one is Matrix counters.
Yeah, Matrix.
What?
Matrix from the card counter. Life Matrix. So it's an artifact where you pay 4 and tap it, and you put during your upkeep put 1 Matrix counter on a creature. You can remove that Matrix counter to regenerate that creature.
That's incredible. I love
It's from Legends and it's reserve list, and I don't know if it's any good, but I'm gonna try it out. Because how many people are playing Life Matrix?
Yeah.
Probably very few.
That's correct.
It costs 4 and you have to put 8 mana and tap it into it. I mean, it's a lot of mana.
Maybe it's good. Everything's good with infinite mana.
Everything's good with the Ozolith. There's only the Ozolith.
So my idea about the Insole Artifact would actually work with the Ozolith. It would have a bunch of counters on it. And if you made it into a creature, then all those counters would be effective. It
actually has all those counters, yeah. It actually does keep all those counters.
Hey, Pioneer folks.
You just cracked the code.
We cracked it.
The Da Vinci Code.
As if Insult Artifact wasn't good enough already.
Yeah, now we gotta jam this Oswald in, I guess.
So what I learned today is we're going to remember that you cannot mutate onto humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you learned one thing from us today, it's that.
Of all the interaction questions.
I just want to see, and if you make it happen, listeners, I want someone to take a picture of Mimic Vat with like 7 things under it, and you choose the best one. That seems like a really good interaction. And if someone is actually playing the Leadership Vacuum, which I will be honest, I love that card, and I'm pretty sure I talked about that over the holidays when we were talking about some of the better cards that were underplayed.
Yeah, during our 10 under 10.
I think I'm not sure. I feel like Leadership Vacuum was one of them, but I do agree it's underplayed. But I only have I think I only have the one copy because it came in a pre-con, but it's in a deck, so I can say I'm playing. Oh, Coil's holding one up on the screen now.
I play it in one deck. I play it in my Jorian deck, which people don't enjoy playing against because it is at control.
Proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
Proud of you.
I also took apart my Jorian deck because it's not fun to play against.
You know, with
mine was Storm though.
Yeah, say with Riel printed, I don't even know if I was gonna have Riel as the commander for this deck and not change a thing.
Riel's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
So we covered new mechanics, and we covered and some rules interactions.
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to hear about my Marisi deck and the new cards it's getting?
Oh heck yeah!
I mean, do I have to, or are you going to force me to?
I'm going to force you like Marisi goads. I'm going to goad you into listening until my next turn. And Perfect. You have to listen, but this time you have to listen to me and not just listen to everyone else.
Oh, okay. Fair.
So, Marisi, Breaker of the Coil. It's a 5/4 cat warrior for 1, a red, a green, and a white. And it says your opponents cannot cast spells during combat, not during yours, during all combats. They cannot cast spells during combat. Pretty relevant, not gonna lie. It's happened a few times where I go, you can't do that, and their plan was foiled. And it also says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, goad each creature that player controls. Goading means until your next turn, that creature, all of those creatures attack each combat if able, and they must attack somebody other than you, if possible. 1v1, Marisi's not so great because they can't attack someone else, so they can attack you. So this deck is all about swinging. This is probably one of my most, I guess, a really fair deck, because if my board gets wiped or I can't get in, it really doesn't do a whole lot. It's irritating because I make people swing, and it has done a lot of work before where you really only have to swing at one person, and then they have to swing, and that means that they're always going to be open to swing at them, and eventually you're going to get everybody. So this card, or this deck plays pretty much all of the goad cards that are available in Naya today, but we're getting a few new ones in the new commander decks. Specifically one, it's an insect that says at the beginning of your end step, each player may put 2+1/+1 counters on each creature they control. Or it says, each may, and then goad each creature that had counters put on it. So this is a little bit like the Orzhov Advocist. I don't know if I want to play this one because people are just going to say, no, I'm not going to put counters on it. But it's another goad creature, so I feel like it belongs in the deck. You also have Frontier Warmonger from the new set. It says whenever one or more creatures attack one of your opponents or a planeswalker they control, they gain menace. So you're just making it much more difficult to block creatures. And this counts for your opponent's creatures as well. It just says attack one of your opponents, not one of your creatures. It's just creatures in general. And then there's some enchantments that you specifically enchant a creature and they're goaded. One gets +2/+2. And then when it attacks, you create a treasure token. And then I just like the free spells, the new, if you control your planeswalker or your commander, it's a free spell. So Flawless Maneuver gives your creatures indestructible. So if you're If your combat didn't go so well, you can just, let's retry this next turn. So anyway, the goal is to play creatures and just all you need to do is 1 damage, just 1, and then chaos ensues. So you're trying to make things unblockable. So you play creatures that are unblockable, just in general. Mm-hmm. Shout out to my Ginger Brute. I've got 2 decks that love Ginger Brute. He's got haste, and you can make it so he can't be blocked by anything except other creatures with haste. So not a lot of stuff. I mean, there is a lot of stuff, but not a lot of stuff that I see has haste. So you're playing creatures that also grant other creatures unblockable. So you've got they're an older creature type, the Endals. There's a Spirit Endal that has pay 1 and a white, and you can forecast. You can reveal it from your hand 1 time a turn, only during your upkeep, to give a creature shadow until end of turn. So shadow creatures can't be blocked except by creatures with shadow. And shadow doesn't show up very often, so you just give your creatures shadow. Or you play other creatures that already have shadow. Chances are it really just says they're unblockable. So you play all these creatures that are unblockable, and you back it up with cards that make it so that your opponents have to attack each other, and that the creatures get stronger when they attack each other, like Gahiji, Honored One. It's a creature that says whenever a creature attacks one of your opponents or a planeswalker they control, it gets +2/+0. So they're little baby creatures, get a little bit of a buff. So they take each other out a little quicker. A few interesting cards in this deck that I play. Smothering Tithe, not one of them, but shout out to Smothering Tithe. Great card. If you don't play it, you should play it. Who's booing me? That card's so good.
I think both of us just did.
So we're playing Bedlam, an enchantment that says creatures can't block. So who needs to block? And then when I swing, I just make you swing at someone else. It's totally not a big deal. Don't destroy my enchantment. I love this enchantment.
So conversely to having booed the Smothering Tide, as soon as you said Bedlam, I started freaking out and throwing up thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Good.
See, I give and take, right? I get it.
Yeah, both are 4-mana enchantments. Just play one and nothing else.
Right. There's another card that is I really like playing commander-specific cards that just don't seem to work with other commanders, but work really well. There's a card, Outmaneuver. It's an instant for a red, an X. X, target blocked creatures deal damage to defending player instead of to the blocking creatures this turn. So you still get your damage through at instant speed. And you only have to pay 2 for that because you only need really 1 of your blocked creatures to get the damage through. So you're really only swinging with 1. Another card that works really well in this deck is Master Warcraft. Instant speed. Play this only before attackers are declared. You choose which creatures attack and how each creature blocks. So you can basically say, these creatures are going to attack and no one's going to block. Or you can force all of your opponent's creatures to attack someone other than you. This is mostly used to make it so your opponents don't block you. So you can just start that whole the Goad War.
Yeah.
What else do we have in here? We've got a melee, the melee mechanic from the conspiracy sets. Conspiracy Take the Crown?
Yeah, Conspiracy 2.
Conspiracy 2.
Take the crown,
Yes.
Yeah.
Melee says whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 for each opponent you attacked with the creature this combat, like Custody, Soul Caller. So it gets stronger the more creatures you're attacking, but there's other creatures that get you make a copy. No, what am I thinking of? It's
Myriad?
Yeah.
So
Myriad.
Blade of Selves. Myriad. Myriad is also really, really good. So whenever this creature attacks one player, it also attacks. You make a copy attacking each player. So there's the Flying Angel that when it's just I think it's a 3/3, and when it attacks each opponent. That one's really good if they don't have any flying, because then at that point they're essentially tapping out each turn unless they play a blocker in the air after combat. Yeah, it's really great. And then and then you just swing. That's what this deck does. So you're trying to get in on the ground and then force everybody to attack each other, and then hopefully have enough life when you get to the point where it's 1v1 that they can't take you out and just kill you like Coil did to me the one time I finally got to 1v1, and he was like, I'm just going to just gain life and then swing at you for like 70.
That was ridiculous. I can't believe that actually came out of that.
So this deck's really fun. We'll post this deck list online. If you're looking for something where you can attack everybody equally and then hopefully not get attacked equally and mostly just be left alone for the most part while they try to deal with your enchantments or try to deal with your commander. Because the commander being out is the whole thing, right? If you lose Marisi too many times, it's too expensive, and then your deck's not really going to do a whole lot. Mm-hmm. But that's the kind of decks I play. If I lose my commander, I'm probably going to lose.
I mean, the format's called Commander.
It is. Value Town decks, Schmalue Town decks.
Boo Value Town. Or Aloro, I guess. Just boo Aloro in general.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, I'll boo Aloro.
All right, good.
Boo. Boo.
I feel like people who play Aloro boo Aloro.
I think you're right. I feel like people who play Aloro also boo Aloro.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe this other guy at the table's also playing Aloro.
Oh.
Who does that?
Why would you play Aloro? Pulls out Aloro.
Oh yeah, that's right.
4 players who are all playing Aloro sit down at the same game. Who keeps track of life?
No, they just wait
Not
till someone
it.
gets their win condition that doesn't matter about what other people's life totals are.
Well, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us this week and talking about things that I hope I'm going to run into, and then I'm going to call you as my judge and say, what does this do again? I know there's something that happens here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
In a couple weeks, hopefully, we'll be able to start venturing out a little bit more. I don't know how long it's going to take to obviously get out of quarantine, but we've got curbside pickup and Ikoria comes out next week. So I'm excited to open some cardboard.
Oh yeah, can't wait to pick up my box.
Right?
Get those sweet Godzilla promos.
Which one are you wanting? Which one do you want? Is there a specific one you're hoping to open?
I think I want the Mothra.
Yeah.
Mothra's cool.
That giant
and
creepy
also,
cocoon.
Luminous Broodmoth is just really good.
Yeah, Luminous Broodmoth is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous card.
Yeah, I do need that for the new counters deck. It's just so good. Oh, you come back with flying counters? Sweet. Yeah. That's all I needed. Well, thank you everybody for listening. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Twitter at GuardianPod. You can find me at ATFlory.
You can find me at Wormcoil Engine.
And where can we find you, Anthony?
You can find me at Fungrove Elder.
So
like the card Dungrove Elder, but with an F instead of a D.
Oh, yeah.
You can look for hashtag Guardian Project Pod to find our posts and episodes, and you can email us at guardianprojectpod@gmail.com if you have any questions or you have any topics that you want us to go over. And then if you're on Discord and you're interested in joining the discussion, feel free to send us a message and we will get you an invite. Is there anything else that we have? I feel like I cut you off there, Anthony.
Oh, I was just going to say, if anybody has any more questions that weren't covered here, feel free to at me on Twitter. I'll try and respond.
Yes. When you think of those ridiculous questions that aren't related to mutating onto a human.
You can't do that.
Because you cannot do that. Send them to Anthony. All right, we'll see you guys all next week.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
So I got one non-rules related question. You ready for this, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Why wasn't Kiora printed in Ikoria? Huh? What happened?
Biggest miss of all time.
Lair of Behemoths. Behemoth Beckoner. What happened?
Yeah, I am just as mad as you.